Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, this is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and I'm joined tonight by my good friend, the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends, and her name is Dee Pierce.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Dee. I am happy to be here too. Uh, we have a lot of topics for you tonight.
Yes.
Our first topic is our first topic is Trump.
Is he alive? That's the big question.
I'm not going to discuss that.
No, we're not talking about that, but that's the big issue going around right now.
Our second topic is what's happening with China at this point. Our third topic is countdown. The countdown refers to these to a renewal of the Israeli-Iran conflict.
Okay.
Fourth topic is what's going on with BRICS right now. The fifth topic is the possibility of a collapse of the U.S. due to financial bankruptcy. We still got people talking about that kind of thing. And the final topic is the U.S. on the verge of disaster?
Yeah, it looks that way.
We're on the verge of disaster, and that's probably true in many ways, and we're going to talk about that through some of the articles and videos we have for you tonight. So let us begin in the usual way by sharing on Facebook. If you will give us a moment, we will do that.
Yes, I'm sharing right now. Sharing is caring.
It is indeed. So,
I see we got people coming in.
yeah.
And
Have we got people coming in?
oh, I just saw on the top of my Facebook that it shows nobody's commenting. On the Facebook, it shows the people.
And nobody's commenting, but there are, I think, at least 17 people coming on Facebook, right? Something like that. Oh, wow. I have to call my daughter later. It turns out something happened to my cousin. She's starting to get into dire straits. Okay, so let us begin with our first piece tonight. But let's look at our comments first. No, there are no comments, except for my comment. Can you hear me? Which was intended for the private chat. Okay. So let's hit our first article. This is a piece by the most wonderful journalist of these times, anyway, Pepe Escobar. At least he's the most colorful journalist. Let us say that. Okay, this appeared, in the Un's Review. It first appeared in Strategic Culture Foundation, I believe. And the name of it is Mythic Trump, the Incendiary Narcissus. Oh, Narcissus already. And there's a painting of the incendiary Narcissus. with a dog. And a little play on words there, Narcissus US. Mythic Narcissus, depending on his mood, while facing his reflection in the pool, may at any moment authorize Kiev hits on Moscow and St. Petersburg with um, um, with missiles that can reach them. The text says it's long range missiles, but they're not really particularly long range. 350 kilometers, 400 kilometers. That's not even a medium range, intermediate range. Okay, but with missiles that can get to Moscow and St. Petersburg, that's basically the message. Alistair Crook's remarkable analysis of Trump, and by the way, we covered that analysis in either the last show or the show before that, in the context of myth as geopolitics, has left us with much to ponder. So it grabbed Pepe Escobar's attention for sure. There's no escape from Trump's, quote, extraordinary ability to dominate the discourse, unquote, globally, as well as his capacity for, quote, bending people to his will, and thus wreak havoc on the geopolitical chessboard. That's very dramatic, of course. Alistair stresses how Trump is skillfully using the imagery of myth, actually crude archetypes, to always impress, the italics of Pepe's narrative. The only narrative. Yet Trump may not be straight up Dionysian compared to the Apollonian Mr. Putin. He's more like a narcissus drowned in a pool of his own making. When it comes to pop iconography, he's certainly not the godfather of soul, James Brown, more like the Village People, which were themselves a parody. The most disturbing aspect of Trump, the self-made myth, is what grip that death cult in West Asia holds over his imagination. Trump's absolute normalization of genocide has made the whole Wild West civilization complicit. Alistair once again reminds us that, quote, bloodlust Gaza, awakened by the Torah, certainly a few verses in the Torah, is driving, quote, messianic extreme Zionism, unquote, all the way, quote, to barbarism, unquote. That's where we are now, with a license to kill provided by a vicious, intolerant guard, specifically the God of the Bible, Yahweh. Way below the mythical spheres where Trump does not fear to tread, rascals posing as the European political elite, quote unquote, have created another myth. Putin as a, quote, cannibal needing to eat, unquote. And copyright Le Tapis Roi, that is to say Macron, who thinks he's the little king. He's, quote, the beast at the door, unquote, with Russia framed as anti-Europe and anti-West, an existential threat. Putin and Russia morphed as the Antichrist. Well, these intellectual midgets are obviously unaware that it was the Byzantine Empire that survived the Roman Empire in the West for no less than 1,000 years. They resisted everything Goths, the Avars, the Arabs, the Bulgars, until they could not resist the Ottoman Turks. Still, they managed to evangelize the Bulgars in Kiev and the Kievan state of Russia, and even provided a state model to the Ottomans. If we draw a line from Danzig in Poland, to Trieste, but going through Vienna, we can check out how Western Europe in medieval times was in fact, quote, protected, unquote, from periodic nomadic onslaughts. The exception is the Hungarian plains, the final stop for the nomadic waves from Asia. That explains why Europe knows next to nothing of Russia, Central Asia, Eurasia, the heartland for that matter. Europe never had to face the Mongol or Ottoman rule. They might have learned a thing or two from Pax, from the Pax Mongolica and Ottoman inclusiveness. That may also have tamed their superiority civilizational complex born out of a splendid isolation. Next section is I love a man in a uniform. A ghastly Ariadne's thread connects the current appallingly mediocre European political elites, aspiring mini types of minotaurs lost in their own form of labyrinth. The Black Rock Chancellor in Germany comes from the British occupation zone of Germany, the grandson of a Nazi. The Nazis were successfully built up by Britain to position Germany as its proxy in a perpetual war against the country of Russia. The appalling toxic Medusa in Brussels also comes from the British occupation zone of Germany, a noble family with Nazi background. Her, quote, noble, unquote, husband is even worse, descending from war criminals. Le Petit Roi in France, universally despised, is a lowly messenger of Bank Rothschild, financier of British kings and queens since the 18th century. The intermarium, Poland, the Baltic dwarves, Ukraine, always had their governments staffed and controlled by Britain. As for the opposition to the war on Russia, in Romania, it was cooed away. The bottom line is that the Brits are on Totlin Creek, that's total war against Russia, on steroids. So they can snatch the big prize, unencumbered, total control of Europe, or dismissively, quote, the Continentals, unquote. Their 18th century mindset, imperial feudal planners are looking way beyond the rump of Ukraine towards a forever war to weaken and tighten their whole total control over a discombobulated Europe. The only counterpower comes from the former Austro-Hungarian Empire states plus Serbia. They refused this forever war, which will inevitably destroy Europe for the third italics mind time in a little over a century. Their pressing need is to get their act together and form a coalition against a new Balkan War. The current absurdity peddled by the forever war front is that European troops need to be sent to Ukraine before a much hyped ceasefire, and not after. So Antichrist Putin is kept, quote, under pressure, unquote, to capitulate while he's winning. Translation. The Europeans do not want a peacekeeping force. They want a deterrence force capable of advancing whenever they see fit, as in a false flag proving the evil Russians broke the truth. This stupidity is mirrored by European, quote, thinking, unquote, as for instance, the European Union Institute for Security Studies, or EUIS, publishing a new strategic handbook with proposals for the, quote, disempowerment, unquote, of Russia. EUISS, or US, I guess, poses as analytical experts on Russia's form, of, quote, hybrid warfare, unquote. That's pathetic, as hybrid warfare is an American concept. Still, the U.S. goes for broke on establishing hegemony on 5 strategically important latitudes: China, Asia Pacific, the southern Mediterranean, southeastern part of Europe, and sub-Saharan Africa. In sum, the same old shtick. NATO is global RoboCop on crack. Apollo versus Dionysius remixed. Okay, Apollo, of course, was the sun god of the Greeks. Dionysius was the god of wine and excess. Alistair sustains that Putin in the Anchorage summit, quote, understood the psychology of Trump, unquote. Trump, quote, seems to recognize Putin as a fellow in the pantheon of putative, mythic, of leaders, unquote. Once again, the distance between the Apollonian Putin and the not-so-Dionysiac Trump should be the equivalent between Timur, that's a reference to Tamerlane, okay, a great conqueror in, what was it, the 13th or 14th century in Central Asia, and a nondescript MMA fighter. Trump, of course, is the MMA fighter, and Putin, okay, is the Timur type. It's open to vast speculation whether Trump in Alaska might have agreed with Putin to invert the planned Russian foreign asset theft by the EU, and instead force the funds to be invested in the U.S. Now that would be crime, quote, offer you can't uh, um, uh, uh, refuse, unquote, territory. So far, what do we know for sure is that, Witkoff, Steve Witkoff, the real estate version of Bismarck, did not understand anything of what he heard directly from Putin, setting the stage for the Alaska conference. Witkoff hit the U.S. networks full tilt, blabbering that Putin on August 15th had reversed his ultimate form of red line, no NATO for Ukraine. And it looks like Trump followed the real estate Bismarck's massive fake news. As Witkoff himself spun, the Russians made concessions, quote, almost immediately in Alaska. But Witkoff must have been smoking something, or not, because his quote, lost in translation gimmick, in fact, conditioned the whole subsequent tawdry spectacle, unquote, the peacekeepers, unquote. So now mythic Narcissus is saying that the Empire of Chaos won't send any troops to Ukraine, but will support a, quote, security guarantee, unquote, allegedly with spy planes. Well, they are already operating them anyway, and, quote, backup, unquote, as in ISR, air defense and air cover. In practice, there will be no imperial, quote, security guarantees, unquote, to the Ukrainian black void, but the myths of tens of thousands of EU slash NATO troops stepping into Ukraine will persist. Next week, the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok carries the enticing possibility of U.S.-Russia deals being discussed, as in ExxonMobil may be returning to the Sakhalin-1 mega gas project. Already there have been secret talks, with the Rosneft company, okay, which is a Russian energy company, partly owned, if I recall correctly, by the government. Selling American equipment for LNG projects to Russia, including the Arctic LNG 2, and the purchase of, Russian, nuclear icebreakers from the United States. Now that will be something to watch. Meanwhile, no illusions in Moscow as required. And the mythic Narcissus, depending on his mood while facing his reflection in the pool, may at any moment authorize Kiev hits on Moscow and St. Petersburg with long-range missiles. Why not? Quote, I have the right to do anything I want to do. I'm the President of the United States, unquote. Narcissus actually believes he is Theseus, slaying every minotaur in sight, and yet always incapable of leaving the labyrinth. No wonder Moscow needs to be ready 24/7 for some sort, any sort of irrational slaying. So it may not quite sound like that here, but I think what Pepe is doing is warning us of the possibility of a nuclear war because Trump is slightly insane and does not know what he is doing and is changing every day and is being a total idiot about everything. And recently, as we all know, he doesn't appear to be in good uh, uh, physical shape as well. Well, let's say he appears to be in even worse physical shape than usual. I think on that note, we should go back to your comments. So here we are. There are some comments. And here is Evelina. Hello, Evelina. Thank you for coming. And she refers to Icarus, or is it Icarus? No, okay, it's Icarus. It is Icarus, as opposed to, Icarus. And what Icarus did is he flew too close to the sun, and his wings melted, and he fell from the heavens and died. O mythical Icarus, who suffered a great fall when his wings got singed for flying too close to the sun. Yes, indeed, but I'm not sure Trump is really flying too close to the sun, because he always seems to be down in the dirt. But anyway, that's just an opinion of mine. So let us go on to the second article, which is full of facts and full of information. And I think Dee will take over for that one.
Yes, I will.
We will not read a part. We're not going to read the whole of that article because it's very long. But we're going to read about the first 1,600 words of it. Okay, and Dee will do that, as they are full of striking information. So I've shared it for you, Dee, so please go ahead.
Okay. Peter Thiel and Vladimir.
There's something wrong with your sound, Dee. It's not sufficiently loud.
How does this sound? Is that better?
That's perfect.
Okay. Peter Thiel and Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, Apostles of Two Economic Orders, Part 2. Understanding the U.S. and the Chinese economies from Historical Lens, by Hu Bin, August 27th. In the first part of my essay, I outlined how market and competition in the earlier phase of industrial capitalism in the West have given way to monopoly finance capitalism in the pursuit of maximum capitalist profit, aka shareholder value, as advocated by Peter Thiel, the philosophical godfather of Silicon Valley tech and financial elite that rules over the U.S. political economy today. Thiel's own road to riches symbolizes the merger of tech and finance oligarchies. He made his first fortune, $35 million, when he sold PayPal to eBay in 2002.
Okay, just to check on that, it was 55 million.
Oh, it's 55 million.
Yes.
Oh, okay. It looked like 30. Okay, I get. Okay. Since then, he leveraged this relatively modest sum into a net worth of around 23 billion by investing in Facebook, LinkedIn, SpaceX, Palantir, and OpenAI.
Wow.
He is also one of the largest shareholders of Bitmine, a major Bitcoin mining company. Thiel epitomizes the rise of what Jonathan Levy, a University of Chicago economic historian, calls, quote, asset appreciation capitalism in his book Ages of American Capitalism. Asset appreciation capitalism is a form of wealth creation where value is increasingly generated and accumulated through the rising value of assets, such as land and financial instruments, rather than through production of goods.
Right. So, in other words, it's the lazy way of getting rich.
Right. As the U.S. moved from an industrial-focused capitalism to one where financial markets become central to wealth creation and distribution, quote, getting rich, end quote, is all about making owned assets more valuable rather than about creating new wealth through labor or production. The wealth growth of the owner class far outpaces the income growth of workers, even highly skilled and highly paid professionals. The end result is an extreme concentration or monopoly of wealth and power, as well as an extreme inequality. Vladimir Lenin, the, the founder of the Soviet Union and a sharp critic of predatory financial capitalism, accurately predicted that such monopolistic capitalism would evolve into a highly financialized and parasitic form of imperialism that would pursue world hegemony. Lenin's dialectical materialism-based analysis perfectly illustrates the foundational struggle between the US and China that defines the changing world order today. In contrast to the US being a student of Lenin's political economy, China has chosen a completely different path under President Xi Jinping, the socialist market economy. From the start of his time in office, President Xi has focused on growing the real economy, especially manufacturing, promoting competition, and clamping down on tech and real estate oligarchs. The aim of such policies is to prevent China from becoming another hollowed out financialized rentier economy. China has firmly adhered to retaining credit and monetary policies in the hands of the state instead of being captured by private financial interests like the Federal Reserve in the US.
So, I have to add here. Uh, okay, I don't think that the Fed itself is composed of private financial interests. The Federal Reserve itself is a government agency. Some inside of the judiciary would disagree with that,
Mhm.
but the Fed itself thinks that it's a government agency, okay, because it's identified as such by the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve on its website. But there's no doubt that the Federal Reserve is generally captured by private financial interests. In other words, it itself is not a private financial interest, but that doesn't stop it from getting captured by a variety of interests on Wall Street. And I think that has happened, and that is correct. So please go on.
Although China's model is informed by Lenin's warning on financial capitalism, it has evolved from the central planning model of the USSR. China's current political economy is a combination of Hamiltonian economic programs and unique innovations based on its own historical tradition, including decentralized local execution under top-down strategic guidance, meritocratic performance managed of government officials, and hyper-competitive private sector.
Okay, and here I have another comment, okay, which is Okay, if China's political economy at present is a combination of Hamiltonian programs, then you have to recognize immediately where do the Hamiltonian programs come from? They come from the United States. What that reference there, Hamiltonian to, is Alexander Hamilton.
Mhm.
These were the economic programs followed in the United States for quite a long time, and that were responsible for the growth and success of the United States. But we have forgotten about those programs here and are no longer following them. And arguably, that is one cause of the economic decline of the United States. Please continue, Dee.
An example of this economic innovation is what economist Jin Ku called, quote, the Maya economy, in her book, The New China Playbook, which describes how local cities are empowered to foster and grow local champions in key strategic sectors. The China model today is often called, quote, beyond capitalism or socialism, end quote. I criticize this form of political economy.
He doesn't criticize it, he characterizes it.
Oh, I characterize it. Okay. I characterize this form of political economy as market-based state industrial capitalism.
Okay,
If
so
interest,
let's note that according to this author, China is not a communist state, but a capitalist state, a form of state capitalism. So I think that's interesting because we're constantly hearing about the evil communists uh, running everything in China. Okay, while being is saying, no, China is not a communist form of government now. Please go on.
he said, if interested, you can refer to my essay, The Secret Sauce of Chinese Industrial Success. And then the result of such divergent economic choices is that China is becoming the economy of abundance as competition blooms while the US becomes an economy of scarcity as monopolies extract parasitic profits. The signs are all over the place. Chinese overcapacity. The much decried, quote, China overcapacity, end quote, is in fact a sign of full market competition, a sign of abundance. Maybe from the purest return on investment perspective, many Chinese industries have overbuilt and failed to deliver high returns in the short term. But another perspective is China builds for future demands. In contrast, companies in the West build for existing demand with little buffer for resilience. One example is electricity generation capacity. Beijing has invested heavily over 4 decades to develop both traditional and green energies from solar, wind, hydro to nuclear power. As a result, China produces more electricity today than the US, Europe, Japan, and India combined. China's annual electricity demand growth equals to the entire country of Germany, but China builds 2 Germany's worth of new generation capacity each year.
That's an amazing fact, by the way.
Yes,
Just amazing and striking. Please go on.
China is better positioned than any other country to meet the growing demand for electricity from large-scale AI rollout with the world's largest and fastest growing green and nuclear energy generation capacity, excuse me, and the biggest ultra-high voltage grid network. Within the electricity generation supply chain, capacitors play a fundamental role for storing electrical energy and stabilizing supply fluctuations. China holds a dominant position in the overall global capacitor market, with a global market share of 50%. U.S. has a negligible share in the critical component market, representing one more hurdle in expanding its power generation.
So if we want to expand our generation of power, we're probably going to have to buy capacitors from China.
Yes.
Keep going.
The National Energy Agency reported that China's electricity consumption surpassed the 1 trillion kilowatt hour mark in July 2025 as scorching heat waves pushed up demand. This represents an 8.6 growth from a year ago, and equivalent to the whole year electricity consumption of ASEAN countries. No other country can meet such dramatic increase in demand without overloading its grid system. China's quote overcapacity end quote makes sure the country can address demand volatility with ease. Here is an opposite example of Western capacity woes. According to Mark Rutte, head of NATO, the whole NATO alliance cannot match in a year the ammunition production of Russia in 3 months, despite having a collective GDP 25 times larger than Russia.
That's another statistic that's amazing.
It is.
It's amazingly ridiculous.
Mhm.
Please go on.
According to The Guardian, the US and Israel used up 25% of the entire US THAAD interceptor stockpile in the 12-day war against Iran. Iran fired 400 to 500 missiles during the time, many from its old stockpiles. Israel had to sue for peace as the Zionist state was on the verge of depleting its air defense.
So let's comment also there. Right now, the United States is trying its best to make up for these uh, losses in THAAD missiles as quickly as it can, with all kinds of shipments to Israel, of what it has. The only problem is the U.S. has a lack of capacity to produce THAAD missiles in any great number. I believe I read just recently that we're capable of producing about 80 THAAD interceptors per year. Okay, Iran fired 400 to 500 missiles during the 12-day war. It is said the Iranians are preparing to fire multiple times 400 to 500 missiles if Israel restarts the war. It's obvious that the THAAD missiles we're shipping to Israel now will not be able to withstand that kind of onslaught.
Mhm.
That is not going to happen. Please go on.
Pentagon admits it has only 1/4 of the Patriot air defense interceptors it needs for all its war plans. Therefore, it had to ration these interceptors between Ukraine and Israel. If Iran can exhaust US-Israel air defense in less than 2 weeks with its limited defense production base after decades of economic sanctions, how could the US and its vassals sustain a high-end conflict with China when China can fire 2,000 missile salvos a day in the beginning month of a Taiwan war, as per a Rand Corporation war game? The US Navy openly admitted China has 240 times US shipbuilding capacity and in a war of attrition. China can mobilize a wartime production capacity an order of magnitude bigger than the US. In a war scenario, US war planners would be overjoyed if they had an overcapacity issue.
We wish we had an overcapacity issue, right?
Mhm. Artificial intelligence build out.
Sorry.
The global battle for AI dominance is happening between the US and China tech companies. US firms have significant compute advantage from the chip ban, while Chinese firms focus on software optimization and efficient use of limited uh, compute resources.
That's an extremely significant
Mhm,
point. They're doing software. We're trying to get through with this the hardware. The hardware types of resources are much more expensive.
mhm,
So it costs us a lot more to do stuff with computation than it appears it's going to be true for China.
mhm,
Looks like China is going to be able to do things lots cheaper because they're not focusing on having hundreds of computers inside of a network, producing the AI types of computations. Now, China will have to do some of that, but its capacity to produce chips is increasingly great. And recently, they produced a chip that was, um, a 1 nanometer chip. We haven't been successful in doing that yet here in the United States. Taiwan hasn't been successful in actually producing uh, 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 that kind of chip. So the Chinese, in spite of the chip ban, are making great advances in the kinds of chips they're producing, and they're starting to be competitive on the hardware side with NVIDIA chips. That is really saying something. Okay, please go on, D.
They have also pursued divergent product and market strategies. AI leaders in the US, OpenAI, Google Gemini, xAI, Grok, Anthrop- Anthropic, Claude, all are focused on high-priced propriety, closed systems to maximize revenue from the LLMs and generate high return on the massive investment they have made. Market fully expects these firms to monopolize the global AI market and has rewarded them with astronomical valuations. For example, OpenAI is valued at 500 billion, despite having a revenue of just 5.5 billion in 2024 and an operating loss of billions. OpenAI's CFO admitted the company won't turn a profit until it hits 125 billion in revenue.
Obviously, they got a long way to go to get there.
Yes. In comparison, Alibaba, the e-commerce and AI leader in China, has a market capitalization of 280 billion, just half of OpenAI. However, Alibaba generated revenue of 130 billion in 2024, more than 20 times of OpenAI, with a net income of 11 billion. Chinese AI leaders have chosen an quote open source and open weight strategy, the opposite of the US proprietary closed system. Their goal is to provide users and developers everywhere with full access to their free frontier models. The most prominent Chinese AI models are all open source and open weight. DeepSeek RI, Moonshot AI Kimi K2, Alibaba Qwen 3, Xi GLM 4.5, and Minimax M1. By open sourcing their LLMs, these AI startups strive to expand AI usage and applications more broadly to users who want cost-effective, transparent, and controllable AI models that fit their needs and protect their own proprietary data and trade secrets. Chinese AI industry has prioritized broad access and adoption over short-term profits. Their long-term strategy is to monetize their investment through app- application support and customized services rather than charging for usage inference. Instead of creating a bottleneck around frontier AI models, China AI players want to turn large foundational models into a commodity and recoup their investment mainly through value-added applications and innovations built atop these models. While the American AI company's goal is to corner the market and develop dependencies, the Chinese AI companies plan to democratize access and make possible true digital sovereignty. The result has been immediate and overwhelming. Since DeepSeek's launch in January 2025, numerous high-performing Chinese AI models have rolled out, all with, quote, open source, open weight. Their performance are close to parity and sometimes overtake the leading proprietary models in benchmarking tests. According to Martin Casado, a general partner at Silicon Valley-based venture capital firm A16Z, formerly known as Andreessen Horowitz, Chinese open-source frontier models are used by 80% of AI startups looking for funding at his firm.
Yeah, sure. Because when you're a startup, you can't afford, uh, the enormous hardware expenses
Right.
that uh, uh, companies such as OpenAI, uh, uh, Anthropic, Tesla, and other such companies have made in order to to do their AI.
Mm-hmm.
Please go on.
Casado and many industry insiders like Ali Farhadi at the Allen Institute for AI are predicting that China will most likely lead the coming wave of broad AI applications.
Right, and that's where the payoff is.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, this kind of elephantine strategy that we have followed is not only enormously expensive, and of course, that leads to high valuations for these firms, but okay, it's very different from the strategy of the Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like in the future, the Chinese are going to be the leaders, and that most of the AI startups that are getting started, okay, at this point,
Right.
are going to be using the Chinese models in order to develop, uh, um, their applications.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, what's going to happen to the AI firms that were startups here and took the hardware route? Right now, they are, extremely overvalued. Their value is going to crash.
Right.
And a lot of investors in these companies are going to find themselves at odds uh, uh, with financial reality, most likely very soon. It's ridiculous that OpenAI has a market cap
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's practically twice that, okay, of Alibaba. I mean, Alibaba is obviously a much more successful company
Hmm.
and will remain so, you know, in the future, while stock in OpenAI is going to crash. I can't say how soon it's going to crash, of course. Uh, yeah, but eventually, okay, it's going to crash.
And you see the difference of psychologies. China's always looking to build things, no matter what it is, build it strong, and they look for the future and the long term.
They look to the long term, and they're trying to look to the efficiency of the product
Right.
continuously, and they're trying not to rely on major financial investments. They're willing to make the major financial investments, but they're always looking for value for the dollar,
Right.
in spite of the fact that they're very close to, being a monetary sovereign. In other words, they could spend the huge amounts of money that we spent as well, but they're looking for a better way of doing things, and
Hmm.
they're getting to a better way, okay, of doing things. I think the capitalization or the investments that were made in DeepSeek when they got started were only $5 million, and when they released their first model in January, it was based on a company with a capitalization of 5 million. It wasn't in dollars; it was in yuan. Okay, but the equivalent of that in dollars, which is hugely different from OpenAI. But in spite of that, the performance of DeepSeek R1 was competitive with performance of the OpenAI model at that time. This is another area where the Chinese are likely to dominate, and we have bet on the wrong horses once again.
Like the U.S. is always looking for something quick profit, not looking for long term.
Yes. Okay, let's skip the piece on housing price, okay, and inflation, because I think that's interesting, but it's not as much to the point
Right.
here. But I think the section on fixed asset and infrastructure investment, which I've pulled up here, is very striking. So you might want to read that also.
Okay. Fixed asset and infrastructure investment. Another sign of the economy of abundance in China is in the area of fixed asset capital investment. Over the decades, China has invested trillions to create incremental new capacity, from factories, roads, high-speed rail, ports, power grids to telecom infrastructure. Out of the 60,000-kilometer total high-speed rail worldwide, 48,000 kilometers were built in China since 2008. China plans to expand its domestic high-speed rail network to 60,000 kilometers by 2030, recently starting the Xinjiang-Tibet high-speed rail construction. 18 of the 20 tallest bridges in the world are in China. 7 of the top container ports are in China. The top U.S. container port, the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, ranks 17th behind Dalian in North China. 4 of the top 10 hydro dams are in China. In 2024, China accounted for 70% total world EV production, 80% generic key starting materials, KSMs, and active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, 80% solar panels, 77% batteries, over 50% steel and cement, and 90% refined rare earth. According to World Bank, By 2024, China accounted for 36% global manufacturing output, compared with 12% for the US. China's share of global manufacturing is bigger than US, EU, and Japan combined. Most Chinese capital investments are financed by state-owned banks. The banks channel the high savings of the population to provide industries under the guidance from both the market and the government.
Okay, so that paragraph is based on the idea that the savings of the population are loaned out to business people. Okay, that assumes, of course, that the Chinese banks don't have the authority to issue deposits based on the loans themselves. But I doubt that. I think that, Wabin is simply mistaken about this, and that the high savings of the population stay in the banks,
Mhm.
and the banks are creating deposits when they actually make loans. But I'd have to check on that. I don't know if that's true for sure. Please go on, Dee.
While there are certainly overreaches, like the blind overinvestment in real estate in the 2000s, most resource allocations are rational and productive, as with the decade-long Made in China 2025 initiative that focused on high-tech manufacturing and delivering amazing results. Such investment had led to massive productivity gains and has put China on the leading edge of future technological innovations. Beijing has also learned that the market is not infallible, as we have seen with the speculative housing bubble. Government intervention is needed to achieve the right balance. On the other hand, capital investment in the US and, more broadly, the West has stalled except for the ongoing AI craze with massive data center and related power generation buildout, which is most likely another bubble to burst soon if the overwhelming launch of chat. Um, okay, I'm all over the place here.
I'm sorry, I seem to have done something I shouldn't.
Yes,
So let's see where we are.
I was about to say chat GDP. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, here is overwhelming launch of Chat GPT-5 is anything to judge by. Capital investment is mostly in existing capacity and serves mainly to facilitate transfer of ownership such as M&A, share buybacks, or privatization of public utilities.
Okay, the M&A, of course, is mergers, and acquisitions.
Okay. Little incremental productive capacity is built. Despite the quote rebuild America's infrastructure end quote pledge made by every U.S. administration since George W. Bush and quote infrastructure week end quote also every week in Trump 1.0, little actual investment has gone into rebuilding the country's rundown highways, rails, ports, bridges, and power grids. The American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE, estimated nearly 77,800 bridges nationwide were structurally deficient in 2023. When Apple announced its giant $600 billion domestic investment, I decided to dig into what projects Apple is funding. The only concrete programs are 1. A manufacturing academy in Detroit, 2. A new AI server factory in Houston, and 3. Sourcing US-made rare earth from MP Materials. The Manufacturing Academy and rare earth sourcing are hardly big-ticket capex projects, and I doubt an AI server factory, however grandiose, will be a multi-billion affair. the most advanced semiconductor foundry built by TSMC, probably the most expensive manufacturing project possible, cost around $20 billion. Unless Tim Cook plans to build 30 state-of-the-art 3nm foundries, it is hard to imagine these paltry projects Apple has specified would add up to $600 billion. By the way, I checked, there will be no iPhone to be made in the US or Mac Air for that matter. If Cook is not lying, how could Apple invest such an astronomical amount of money? A quick search on Google Gemini gives the answer away. Quote, Apple has spent over $945 billion on share buybacks since 2012, with its most recent major buyback program authorized in May 2024 for $110 billion. This includes a record-breaking $81.8 billion in buyback during the 12 months ending March 31st, 2024, and a figure of $697.7 billion over the preceding decade ending in June 2025. End quote. I assume Tim Cook would be doing a few more $100 billion worth of share buybacks to meet the commitment to Trump in his contribution to, quote, make America great again, end quote. Similarly, when large businesses in the U.S. announce their investments, few are greenfield new capacity. Most often than not, such investments are transfer of ownership transactions such as share buybacks, leveraged buyouts, or privatization deals. The only problem is share buybacks don't create jobs or translate in productive capacities.
So let us stop it at, with that point. The rest of the article is very good, of course, and you ought to read it. But I think the basic point is made. There's no comparison between what the United States is doing with its industry and what it's doing with actual development of its country compared to what the Chinese are doing. The Chinese are serious about their development and their leadership of the world. We make a lot of pronouncements, and we build a lot of narratives about how wonderful we are when it comes to progress, but we are not actually delivering.
No, we're not.
The Chinese are delivering. The idea that we can successfully fight a war against China is becoming increasingly ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Even though this article was not about the military productive capacity of China, it's also true that their military productive capacity greatly exceeds ours,
Mm-hmm.
and that in the at the parade in China that just took place, they're supposed to have unveiled 20 new types of weapon systems. There's no way we're competing with them, in any area. And what we need to do is come back to the United States and begin to reconstruct before we find ourselves as nothing but a second-rate, declining country. So let's look at our comments again.
Okay.
Ink dry, earthquake, Don, your son. I found out my ex from Texas passed in February.
I'm sorry.
Don is here with me. Yeah, Don is her son. So not many comments. Earthquake where gold mine explosions. Nevada. Okay, in Nevada. So let's go on to our videos and the topics, okay, of our videos. We are now down to the topic, okay, of countdown in relation to the war between, the Iranians, okay, and the Israelis. The coming war that everybody is predicting. Here's an interview of Colonel Mcgregor. All right, the inimitable. Is that the right one? Sorry.
Give everything to Ukraine, and for that weaponry to include the potential to penetrate deep into the Russian heartland. I'm thinking of the new cruise missile allocation, which Trump.
I have to start that actually from the beginning.
Sciatic nerve pain, do not drink iced tea. If you have sciatic nerve pain, there's three.
Colonel Douglas Mcgregor is the oracle. There is nothing about military and political military affairs that he is not a master of. He's a retired U.S. Army colonel. He's an author and a defense and foreign policy consultant. And
okay, that praise for Doug Mcgregor is praise which is well deserved, but okay, it is excessive because even in the military field, Doug doesn't know everything about everything. He is, though, extremely well informed. That much is true.
An all-round good guy, as a fellow Scotsman usually is. Colonel Mcgregor, thanks for joining us. We've got a lot of wars to cover, so let me press on immediately. I'm very worried indeed about the Persian Gulf. The Russians have evacuated their embassy in Tel Aviv, and the Americans have abandoned two of their most vulnerable military bases in Iraq.
What's interesting is I don't think the Russians have abandoned their embassy in Tehran. I think that embassy still is alive and well. So it's interesting they closed it in Tel Aviv.
Peremptorily indeed. And Russia kind of knows from both sides what's going on. They have a relationship with Israel, and they have a very close relationship now with Iran. They seem to think, and the American government seems to think, that the balloon might be about to go up there again. Do you think so?
I've been expecting something in September, latest October, because the Greater Israel Project has no chance of success. And I think Mr. Netanyahu knows this, unless they can ultimately balkanize and destroy Iran. So the war has to continue. There's no question about that if you're an Israeli. On the other hand...
So Doug is saying it's destroy Iran or bust for Israel because of the way Israel is thinking, because of the crazy way it's thinking. And that's too bad for Israel.
It is.
Because they are threatening their own continued existence because they take that attitude.
I'm not sure exactly when. I know that a lot of materiel, theater high altitude air defense missiles and equipment are being shipped to Israel. So I know we're busy trying to assist the Israelis with regard to defending themselves. And of course, they have limitless ammunition from us and whatever else they need. I know the Russians have been on the ground in Iran trying to repair, restore, and ultimately improve their integrated air defenses. So a war is inevitable in terms of, happening again. We just don't know exactly when. And these evacuations from Iraq are interesting. because I remember when President Trump was president the first time around in 2020, when I was working for him, he was very interested in getting us completely out of Syria and Iraq. And of course, he was obstructed at that point. So for this to happen suggests that something is indeed building, but none of us knows when or how it will happen.
Well, turning then to the war that we know all too much about and that is still raging, it's a commonplace to state that Donald Trump hasn't ended the Ukraine war in 24 hours or 24 weeks. He is, in a sense, whilst not financially, he says, doubled down on the war. He has empowered the seven dwarves of the European Union, as long as they buy the weapons from him. He's quite happy for the European Union to supply limitless weapons, limited only by questions of industrial capacity, but to empty their armories, give everything to Ukraine, and for that weaponry to include the potential to penetrate deep into the Russian heartland. I'm thinking of the new cruise missile allocation, which Trump announced, which I think it was 2,000 or 3,000 units will go to Ukraine. These are well capable of penetrating into.
Of course, they cannot go to Ukraine if Ukraine doesn't survive the next 2 months. There's a very good possibility they will not survive the next 2 months. So, in some way, the Trump offer is an empty offer because we don't have the capacity to deliver 3,000 missiles right now.
Russian territory deeply. So, what is it? Was Trump lying when he said he wanted to end the war in Ukraine? Or was he telling the truth but is simply unable to do so? And if it's the latter, why?
I think the second answer that you provide is accurate. And I think that's what he finally concluded after he met in Alaska with President Putin. I don't think President Trump, who is certainly not a student of European history, culture, economics, geography, ever really understood the complexity of the issues in Ukraine. I don't think he completely grasped what he was dealing with. Whether or not he does now is open to question, but he certainly did not until he got to Alaska. I think you're raising a very important question. If you're sitting in Moscow and you're looking at events, you're saying, well, first of all, we had a good meeting with President Trump and his team. Remember, they met previously in Saudi Arabia, and on both occasions, both teams said they'd made some progress in the direction of normalizing relations with Russia, and that's something that President Trump has said he wanted to do. However, having done that, of course, did not address Ukraine. And I think he decided that, I can't fix Ukraine. I can't solve this, which is something he should have understood from the beginning. I think he does understand that.
Okay, so if he can't solve Ukraine, what is he really doing? He's providing, an open invitation for Putin to solve it by winning a total victory, over Ukraine. He's not offering any help in the short run, to the Ukrainians. So Trump is playing a game. He's probably agreed with Putin that he's going to make some motions as if he's going to help the Ukrainians. But at the same time, he won't be delivering any help to them in the short run, which is the kind of help that they need.
And on the other hand, I think he's being advised by people who are telling him, well, you can't just walk away. And remember, that was what I urged from the beginning, very early on to President Trump was, look, let's leave this. Announce you're suspending all further armaments. We'll send humanitarian assistance to the Ukrainians. But the best way to end this war is to stop the flow of cash and weapons to Ukraine. At that point, the war has to stop because the Ukrainians really are at the end of their tether as it is. The Russians will then begin to take us seriously. I think he's been urged by everybody on the Hill and elsewhere not to do that. In other words, he's turned out to be like too many politicians, George. He wants to be a little bit pregnant. So he's straddling the proverbial fence. Now, this latest announcement is horrific. The notion that we would send thousands of cruise missiles over there is insane to begin with. Secondly, it's not going to happen very quickly because we can't build that many in the time that remains for Ukraine. So I think the Russians are looking at this and saying, we don't have any choice anymore. We've got to end this war. So we're going to press ahead. Now, what is press ahead?
And they have been pressing ahead. Their attacks on Ukraine have been getting increasingly intense, really severe. They're destroying Kyiv now, which they haven't been before. And they've started to attack, sending special forces into city of Odessa now as well. So they're going to try for a conquest, okay, of Odessa before it's over.
Mean? Well, they've already got special operations forces on the outskirts of Odessa.
Well, there it is.
They've already destroyed all potential military targets in and around Odessa. They're going to move towards Zaporizhia. They're going to get complete control of Kherson, all of the areas in southern Ukraine. There's no choice in that matter. And eventually, I think we'll see them occupy Odessa. I've always felt that way. They've said that for the last 3 years. And you'll remember that Russians were herded into buildings in Odessa and then burned alive by the Ukrainians down there. That's something the Russians have never forgotten, and I would not forget that either. So I think those things are on the table. The question is, do you cross the river in strength and go north to Kiev? In other words, you eliminate the cancer because they don't want to refight this war in the future. And now it seems that MI6 in London is very interested in pushing this man Zaluzhny, who is ostensibly their puppet. That's not going to fly with Moscow. They will not accept that under any circumstances. And then finally, at least President Trump has now said,
all-round good guy, as a fellow Scotsman usually is. Colonel Mcgregor.
Of cruise missiles over there is insane to begin with. Secondly, on the outskirts of Odessa, they've already destroyed that way. They've said that for the last 3 years. And you'll remember that Russians were herded into buildings in Odessa because they don't want to refight this war in the future. And now it seems that MI6 in London is very interested in pushing this man Zaluzhny, who...
Okay, what I started out to say at this point is that he's never going to be accepted, as Doug says. But the reason why he's never going to be accepted is because he has strong support from the neo-Nazis inside of Ukraine. And he may be a neo-Nazi himself. So that's one reason why the Russians are never going to allow him to take over Ukraine.
Is ostensibly their puppet. That's not going to fly with Moscow. They will not accept that under any circumstances. And then finally, at least President Trump has now said, as I understand it, there will be no U.S. forces on the ground in Ukraine. Now, we've had this confusion over the last several days. Well, we may do this, we may not. I'm hearing he says no. The president of Poland, who is very much an important actor in all of this, has said no Polish troops on the ground in Ukraine. And as I've said from the very beginning, you didn't have Poland at this summit in the White House. Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, they border Ukraine. They are key to the outcome. They've been treated as though they're second-class citizens, irrelevant. They have to be on board for whatever happens in Ukraine. So I think that summit in the White House was a serious mistake. You called them the seven dwarves. The people that came in there were a disaster because they have nothing at stake. What they say is irresponsible. Starmer talking about what? 30,000 British troops? Good luck. The British Army, as you and I both know, is a shadow of its former self. It's in bad shape. It's really tragic. The same thing is true in France. As a friend of mine in the French Army says, the only thing we're prepared to do is go on safari in Africa. So there's 60,000 troops. And then I listened to a British analyst who came on, and I've forgotten his name, but he explained that you would have to have at least 300,000 troops that would operate effectively along the border of Ukraine to guarantee anything. And then finally, the Russians have said, if you move any troops in there from Western Europe, that's a red line for us. You make yourselves a co-belligerent, we'll attack you. So where are we? I think we're where we thought we would always be for months. And every time I've talked to you, this has come up, really. Who is going to determine the outcome? Russia. How will it be determined? On the ground in Ukraine. End of discussion. And in the meantime, NATO is falling apart. Anybody who thinks that's robust and capable is crazy. The same thing is true for the EU. If you live in Hungary and Slovakia and Poland, you're being told you need to accept 1 million people from Africa, the Middle East, and Southwest Asia. These people have said, no, thank you. We're not interested in that. We see what's happened in Great Britain. We've seen what's happened in Germany and Italy and France. We don't want that here. Everything is falling apart in the West. Nothing is working. So in the final analysis, Russia is winning this war, and it will determine the outcome. We won't.
Now, the Ukrainian authorities themselves, we learned from leaked documents this week, indicate that they have lost 1.7 million men. These are First World War levels of casualty. That's not just killed in action, it's also missing in action. But a very significant number of those are almost certainly dead and being concealed as being dead because it saves Zelensky paying out death benefit to their widows and families. 1.7 million Ukrainians missing in action or killed in action, plus 250,000 deserters, plus 9 million Ukrainians living outside in our countries at our expense and not very well received, frankly, in most polite society. I saw some of them in Canada, I think it was, complaining about the miserly $2,000 a month that they were being given by the Canadian taxpayer. They are going to remain in those countries. Ukraine is effectively a failed state now, isn't it?
I think the nation of Ukraine, if we want to call it that, is in ruins, thanks to this man Zelensky and his backers in Washington and London primarily. Now, if you look at Poland right now, the Polish president, in addition to saying we're not going to send any more troops to Ukraine, they sent several thousand over there. They lost at least 2,000 killed trying to help the Ukrainians. They've said no more, out of the question. They've got several million Ukrainians in Poland. 1 out of 5 of them is applying for citizenship in Poland. So the Poles are now struggling with this because Poland is not that large a country. They've already got 40 plus million. They would like most of these Ukrainians to go home. And you're right, in Austria, where they have a lot of them, people are on the streets saying, stop importing, start deporting. Now, they're not just talking about unwanted Ukrainians. They're talking about large numbers of people from overseas that are non-Europeans. But your point is absolutely valid. This is a disaster. Now, I said a couple of weeks ago when I was asked 1.8 million had been killed, and I was viciously attacked. Now they're saying 1.7. It's actually over 1.7. My sources are Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian. And what they try to do is the following. They try to read all the obituaries, actually visit the cemeteries, visit the hospitals. And more important, some of them have had the opportunity through commercial satellite coverage to find the mass graves. Talking about people being killed. There are mass graves in eastern Ukraine of Ukrainian soldiers. Literally thousands in these graves, essentially bulldozed into the dirt and forgotten because the regime doesn't want to do what you described. And remember, you have so much corruption inside this military. If you want to be evacuated from the battlefield, you have to pay somebody in an ambulance to drive you to a hospital. What kind of an evacuation system is that for a military establishment? Ukraine is destroyed. It's finished. If President Trump really understood any of this, he would do what I said to begin with. simply suspend the aid, say this regime is not legitimate, it's over. But he refuses to do that. You know, we have a similar situation, as you're well aware, in the Middle East. I think if President Trump really understood the reality on the ground in Gaza, he would stop supplying the Israelis, but he can't do that. He refuses to do that. We are prisoners of all sorts of forces right now in the United States, none of which are in our interest. Some of these are big donors, some of these are political, industrial, but they're all bad. So the only conclusion I think most Americans can reach is we're not represented in Washington. Our government is divorced from us. I think you and many of your fellow citizens are reaching a similar conclusion.
For sure. Now, earlier I interviewed your friend and mine, Larry Johnson. He was, as always, in tropical splendor. I wondered if he was on his way to Venezuela.
Yeah, that, of course, is a reference to the tropical shirts of Larry Johnson.
And I asked him if he'd feel safe going to Venezuela. Is Trump really going? We talked about the 7 dwarfs. He's got 7 warships off the coast of Venezuela and 4,000 Marines. What are they doing, Colonel?
Well, there are 7 warships. I don't know if there are 4,000 Marines. I was told there are 4,000 Marines and sailors. That's not exactly an invasion force. But I must tell you that I see a tremendous amount of resemblance between Maduro and Saddam Hussein. If you put them side by side, they begin to look a lot alike. And we're seeing the same playbook applied. Demonize Maduro the way we demonize Saddam Hussein. You know, even though privately you can find a lot of people that will say, damn, we should have left Saddam Hussein in charge in Iraq. We were better off then than we are now. That may be true, but the problem with Maduro is very simply, he has a very large country. This place is the size of France and Germany combined. Only got 26 million people, but millions live on the coast in those big cities. However, and this should not be overlooked, it's probably 3rd in the world, maybe 2nd now, I don't know, in terms of reserves of oil and gas. But they have very, very
I think it's 1st.
expensive, let's say, luxurious emerald mines and gold mines as well in Venezuela. So I suppose if you look at all of that against the backdrop of what we're discussing with another Saddam Hussein episode, it's not impossible that we could be headed there.
Well, of course, Saddam fell because Russia was on the floor, drunk, having its pocket picked. Putin hadn't picked the country up and dusted it down then in 2003. In 2025, Venezuela has extensive relations, both with Russia and with China, just signed a massive oil deal with China, and of course has a close relationship with Iran. And so it's all very circular, this. It's the same countries, it's the same actors being threatened by the same people. It's almost like war throughout the world, isn't it?
Well, to some extent, you have to admit that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. In other words, we've done these things to the Russians in countries that border them. We've been up to all sorts of malevolent activity in Central Asia, in places like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, as well as obviously Ukraine, also now in Azerbaijan, which we see as helping Israel on the one hand, encircle and potentially harm Iran, but on the other side of that coin, Azerbaijan helps us break off Iran from Russia and the One Belt, One Road program, the infrastructure project that provides for rail transportation all the way to and from Iran from Shanghai. So there are a lot of things going on. So it makes sense that you would move into the Caribbean, into our soft underbelly. I keep watching Mexico very carefully because Mexico has always sided with whomever was against us. And I'd be very surprised if we don't see similar mischief down in Mexico.
Okay, Doug is right about that. I characterize it as mischief. But Mexico has come out in strong support of, of Venezuela, and in strong support of non-intervention by us in the domestic affairs of other nations, of Latin America. Claudia Sheinbaum has been absolutely firm in her support for the Venezuelans. And it looks like other Latin American countries are lining up in the same way. We may be confronted by a solid front of, Latin American countries opposing the intervention by the United States. Among the Venezuelans themselves, they have a militia there that numbers 4.5 million people, and they're mobilized already to defend the country. They have a regular army that's pretty sizable too, and pretty well equipped.
We ought to wake up and recognize the futility of what we've done in the Eastern Hemisphere and come to some sort of arrangement with both China and Russia in the Western Hemisphere. Having said that, though, I don't think the Russians or the Chinese are as foolish as we are. From the very beginning, it should have been obvious to anyone with half a brain that we could not fight and win any conflict against Russia on Russia's doorstep. That's just stupid. Strategically, it's an impossibility. We could not have defeated Germany if we had not had allies in the East as well as in the West to attack Germany during World War II. It would have been impossible. The Germans would have defeated us if we had only had the British as allies and attacked from the West. So the point is, I think Mr. Putin is going to be limited in what he's willing to invest in mischief in the Caribbean directed at us. And I think the same thing is true for the Chinese. So they will give Maduro help, but they're not going to do for him what we've done for Zelensky, which is.
But on the other hand, the help that they are giving him and will give him could, coupled with the opposition from the other countries of Latin America, could stop us in our tracks. And I should add that a factor in stopping us in our tracks, is the military strength of, Venezuela. It's a country that is very nationalistic at this point and very supportive of the regime. And if we attack in any kind of mass, there's going to be very strong opposition on that. Okay, on that note, I'm going to end this particular part of the stream. We have another video, much shorter, from Doug that's coming up in just a minute. But before we get there, I would like to check on your comments. Pittsburgh Dude 87 says, I can hear you, Joe, although you look frozen. The Galloway video is playing, though. Well, thank you, Pittsburgh Dude. I appreciate that. I think in recent days, I have been freezing. I don't know exactly what's been causing it, but my sound is okay. So I continue the stream anyway. Evelina says, Ukrainian arms and personnel assisting rogue rebel groups in Africa, but no one is talking about covert activity by Ukraine outside of Ukraine. I don't know what to think about that. It, could be the neo-Nazis trying to get out of Ukraine so they can survive Ukraine, and they're willing to fight, the places where they think they may have a greater chance to survive. That's just a guess on my part, though. I don't have any real information about that, except for focus on Russia. Colombia is known for its emeralds, not Venezuela's. It's not common knowledge. Oh, that's what I thought. I didn't think that Venezuela was so strong, and emeralds. But I haven't paid really that close attention to it. But I agree with you. Colombia is known for its emeralds. It has been for a long time. And Banner, the Star Spangled, says, "Hey, Joe." And I don't know who Banner, the Star Spangled is, but that's that's an interesting handle, of course. So let's get back to another video. With Doug Mcgregor. This one far shorter. This is from a part of his appearance on the Judge's show this week. It starts at about 28:07 in.
Specifically President Trump and Congress, then I suspect the dying will continue, the killing will continue without interruption. And we're heavily invested in all of this because we're part of a larger strategy in the region to balkanize and destroy Iran, to essentially turn Iran into some version of Syria, to ultimately get control of the oil and gas regions as a means, we think, of breaking up BRICS, destroying the One Belt, One Road project that runs from Iran up into Central Asia and Russia. I mean, all of this is bound up together. None of this should be seen in isolation. It is nice to see the British government finally come around. I wish more would in Europe. But the interesting part is that this British government's not likely to last very long.
Right.
And you have a similar situation in Germany right now. The German government is following the British example, trying to suppress free speech and erase the existence in the political arena of the alternative for Germany. To his credit, Vice President Vance has spoken on this subject and been very critical of what the British and the Germans and others are doing. That's a very good thing. Will it make any difference? I don't know.
Hasn't Trump just fallen totally in line with the policies of Joe Biden with respect to Gaza?
Yes, I think so. And that's what we witnessed in his first term, that over time, he came in with a very fresh perspective, fresh ideas, determined to do something. The Russia Gate hoax obviously hamstrung him at the time. But ultimately, he leaves office not accomplishing any of the things that he thought were really important. I think we're seeing that again. Now, in fairness, he has tried very hard on the border with regard to illegal immigration and the drug trafficking. He now seems to be committed, or at least interested in, potentially another front in the war down in Venezuela. I don't think that's the right solution for what we don't like about Venezuela, but that seems to be where he's headed. Again, there is no long-term coherent strategic framework to explain anything. I think what we're dealing with is this predisposition to say, well, I don't like this, I'm going to do this. And everybody around Trump just reinforces it. Sure, go down to Venezuela, boss. Let's make them an object lesson. That'll get everybody on board in the region with what we want. I don't think it will. I think it'll have the opposite effect. It could bring down Colombia, which is very fragile. I think it'll stiffen resistance to us in Mexico. I don't think it'll hurt the drug cartels in the least. So you got to go after the drug cartels. You don't necessarily have to remove the head of state in a country to do that, especially since that head of state may not have much to do with any of it. It looks like the generals of the Venezuelan army are the ones cashing in on the drug trade and shipping the drugs that come out of Colombia up to the United States from Venezuela. You know, all of this is more complex and difficult than President Trump imagines. Remember when he was running for office, he said a lot of things, but probably the most ridiculous was, I can end this war between Russia and Ukraine in 24 hours. But I think it encapsulates a very childish, uninformed, infantile view of the world. And unfortunately, that's what we're stuck with. And there are a lot of people, obviously, that love this and applaud it, think everything's just great. But it's not. Things are bad. And they're going to get a lot worse the way we're headed.
Colonel, you and I will be discussing all of this before a live audience in Dallas, Texas, on Saturday, the 5th of October. 4th of October, sorry, along with Agar Rabasi. and Natalie Brunell, and we'll be questioning each other, and the audience will be questioning us, and it'll be a great opportunity for people who are in the Dallas area to get to meet you and to interact with us. And there it is. I don't know where they found that picture of me pointing. Yours is very elegant. Mine's rather animated, but there we are. Sandwich with two beautiful and brilliant women.
Yeah, well, it looks like you just sentenced someone to a long-term in prison, Judge. And so, anyhow, it's an experiment, and we need people to understand. We're interested in not sitting up there and lecturing the public. We'll make our comments and our statements in response to the questions that Dr. Olga Ravazzi asks us. But then we're going to interact with the audience. We want to know what the audience thinks, because
Right.
he says we want to do this every sort of 120 days or so, every 90 to 120 days, is we want to go around the country to different cities. We want to hear what Americans think.
Okay. For those of us who are watching and want to learn more about it, scan the QR code and you'll get all the information you need, particularly if you are in Texas or are going to be in the Dallas area on the weekend of October 4th, which is coming up very soon. Colonel, thank you very much. Thanks for your time today.
So I wanted to share those statements of Doug's, the brief statements, and also the ad for the judge and for Doug, because I'm sure that's going to be an interesting event for people who are there, and I'm also sure that we're at least going to see a part of it on YouTube. And that part is going to be extremely interesting. I should say, I think Doug Mcgregor always has a lot of interesting things to say, but in a manner similar to the judge, when they get into the area of predicting the financial collapse of the United States, they show their ignorance of the MMT approach to economics. I'll be talking about that in just a few minutes, but now I want to see if there are any other comments from you. Evelyn says 95% of jobs coming out of Colombia. In the Pacific, only 5% out of Venezuela to Atlantic, towards Europe. Thank you, Evelina. I think those facts are, very useful, because they suggest that Donald Trump is all wet, to go after the Venezuelans. Of course, I thought that from the start. I think one of the reasons he's going after the Venezuelans is probably the influence of Marco Rubio, who has had great enmity for the regime in Venezuela for years and years and years. And I think he's the person who's advising Trump, to go after Venezuela as something of a distraction from the troubles that Trump is having in Ukraine, and in the Middle East as well. Things are going bad for Donald Trump in both of those areas. So let's get to our next piece. We still have a lot of pieces to go through here for the night. And time is beginning to weigh on us. But our next is on the subject, of BRICS and BRICS versus the West, and we'll be examining the views, of Pepe Escobar.
Purpose of anchorage would not be Ukraine, that it wouldn't solve Ukraine at all, that it wouldn't move the needle. Purpose.
I'm at the right spot on this right now. I do have a plan in place for all these videos. Okay, this one is a long one, and I am I'm too far in. I should be at the beginning for this one. About the,
Sciatic nerve
oops, sorry.
pain, do not drink iced tea. If you have sciatic nerve pain, there's 3 common
8th, 2025, Pepe Escobar joins us now. Pepe, always a pleasure. Pepe, where are you? Where are you joining us from?
I am at home in Paris getting ready to go to Russia and China.
And what will you be observing? I know because you've told me already, but I want the audience to hear in Russia and China. And who will you be observing in Russia and China?
Wow, that's I wish we had half an hour, Judge, to go to the details. But for you and for our audience, on Sunday and Monday is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization annual summit in Tianjin, close to Beijing. Just to give an idea to all of you, Tianjin is this enormous industrial high-tech hub, 120 kilometers away from Beijing. You take the high-speed rail, and you are there in less than half an hour. And you know how much it costs? $8. Okay,
Wow.
that's the introduction. So who's going to be in Tianjin at the table of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization? Everybody in Eurasia that matters, including the top 4. Putin, Xi, Modi, and Pezeshkian from Iran.
Wow.
All of
Yes.
them on the same table, Judge. So
How
this
about Modi?
Modi
I should mention the North Koreans are going to be there too.
already confirmed he's going, and that's even more, wow, totally groundbreaking. It's his first trip to China in 7 years, and he's going to meet Xi face to face on a private meeting apart from the SCO summit.
Wow. You
It's
know,
this
Donald Trump has ranted and raved against and condemned and blasted BRICS.
Yes.
Hasn't he effectively united and strengthened BRICS?
There's no question about that. And the BRICS players are astonished at the turn of events. Nobody would expect. Actually, Xi Jinping sent a letter to Modi. That was the beginning of the détente, let's put it this way. Modi responded, and then he confirmed, okay, I'm going to the SCO summit, and we're going to talk face to face. This is beyond immense. In terms of SCO unity and BRICS unity, we cannot forget they are both our members.
In terms of the representatives of 2.9 billion people, the 2 representatives will be talking.
Of SCO.
India is 1.5 billion, and China is 1.4 billion. Always keep that in mind.
And of BRICS. So we're talking about the major players of the global south, or what we can call also the global majority. So until a few days ago, the spin, including the spin in China among academics, is that there was no trust between India and China. So Xi and Modi are breaking that. They are rebuilding the relationship. It's amazing. This is an India-China reset, and it's quite significant. It's going to take place at a summit where the main preoccupations are security, counterterrorism, and also economic integration. The SCO these past few years, they are very much focused on economic integration, even more than a security environment across Eurasia. And of course, the president of Iran, Pezeshkian, will be there because diplomatically, the antagonism of the US vis-a-vis Iran, it's something that reflects on the BRICS and the SCO as well. And the observers, Judge, are fascinating, and the partners. Among the observers are Afghanistan and Mongolia. Sooner or later, they will become full members. And among the partners, most of the Southeast Asians will be there. So there are a lot of ASEAN countries who will be at the table as well, paying attention to all the discussions and invited to the discussions.
Do
as
you
well.
expect to be in an audience that will be addressed by President Putin himself?
That's complicated because he will concentrate on Eurasia-wide security, terror, and economic integration matters. They will discuss Ukraine on the table, of course. We don't know what sort of leaks will be authorized. So we have to talk to our friend Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman. It depends on what Peskov decides to tell us.
Right. And if you see Maria, Lavrov's a spokesperson, give her a big hug for me.
She should be there because I'm not sure if Lavrov will be there, Judge, because this is a meeting of the heads of state. So not necessarily they bring their foreign ministers, but it's quite possible.
Putin did bring his foreign minister to Alaska. We know that because he showed up with a sweatshirt saying CCCP on it, which raised everybody's eyebrows, and he got a big chuckle out of it. What did the United States gain by this meeting in Alaska?
Okay, I could answer, let's say, 50% of your question by turning the attention to the Vladivostok Economic Forum, which is going to start next Wednesday. So from Tianjin, I'll come back to the airport in Beijing, fly to Vladivostok because we have to be there one day before because the logistics are very complicated. We even have to do PCR tests. It's a very complicated matter. But at the Vladivostok Forum, which is basically concerned about Russian development of the Arctic and the Far East, including vast tracts of Siberia, they will discuss business essentially. And guess, I would say the invisible guest of honor this year, the US, in fact. I'm very curious to see which American businessman will actually go to Vladivostok this year to start talking about the possibility of many American corporations coming back to the Russian market. And the number one, of course, it's something they already asked my friends in Moscow. And they say, look, it's going to be tight because they won't be able to talk. They don't want to talk to anybody. But I'll try to talk to Rosneft executives because the key project for Exxon was the Sakhalin gas project, where they were partners with Gazprom, with Rosneft, an Indian company and a Japanese company. Because of sanctions, Exxon left. They lost over $4 billion, and they want to come back. And they have been talking to Rosneft.
Well, they can talk to Rosneft all they want, but if the U.S. government doesn't let them back, how are they going to go back?
Exactly. So, but that brings us, Judge, to the pressure that the American energy companies will be applying on Trump to, look, we want to go back to Russia and want to do business over there. And this is your interest, Trump, as well, because these are mega gas projects. These are also gas projects in the Arctic, not only in the Sakhalin Islands, in the extreme Far East, let's put it this way, and of course, something that came out a few days ago, and I'm dying to see if there's any evidence about it, the possibility of the Americans buying Russian nuclear icebreakers.
Oh my goodness.
If that happens, it will be a major game changer. But I think this is too far-fetched at the moment.
So you predicted before Anchorage that the true purpose of Anchorage would not be Ukraine, that it wouldn't solve Ukraine at all, that it wouldn't move the needle on Ukraine whatsoever, but there were other purposes, one of which was commercial and the other of which is the Arctic.
Exactly.
Now you're telling us that there may actually have been steps taken in that direction because of the private sector in the United States, which will try and put pressure on Trump. So let me modify my question. Did the peace process in Ukraine gain at all by the meeting in Anchorage?
No, not at all. Not at all, Judge. To be straight,
Okay, very interesting. Peace process in Ukraine wasn't helped. It was about something else.
Mm-hmm.
The normalization, okay, of the relations between the U.S. And Russia. So the question we have to ask is, wasn't there a deal made between the United States and Russia there, okay, that the United States would basically keep its hands off Ukraine for some time and not do anything to stop what Russia is going to do to win the war fast? I think there may have been that kind of agreement. I think the promise of all those missiles to Ukraine is a distraction. Okay, it's an empty promise. Trump is making that promise because he's getting pressure from people that the U.S. should still be supporting Ukrainians. But Trump himself has given up on Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And is pursuing other goals. He's not doing anything serious to stop the Russians from winning the kind of victory they want to win, inside of Ukraine. And that victory, in my view, will be complete within roughly 2 months from now. And Trump won't do anything to stop it.
No.
And the offer of the missiles is not doing anything to stop it. It's not doing anything concrete. I don't even know if they're going to be able to deliver any of the missiles before the war is over. I'll go on with this now.
straight to the point. And it's crazy because the speed of events, as we all know, is completely breathtaking. I just finished another column, which probably is going to be published in Russia tonight, where I also addressed that at the forum next week in Vladivostok, maybe we're going to have Americans and Russians discussing business. But on the Ukrainian front, absolutely nothing seriously happened that changed the situation. This means the special military operation will continue. This means that nothing can change the Russian perspective and conceptualization of winning the war in the battlefield. Whatever the Trump administration tries, whatever tricks, anything. And of course, the Russians are pretty much aware that for Europe, this is a forever war.
Right. Chris, can you put up President Trump's Truth Social .going offensive? How does the Kremlin view this? I'm only going to read the first part, not his ripping into President Biden. It's very hard, from Donald J. Trump, it's very hard, if not impossible, to win a war without attacking an invader's country. It's like a great team in sports that has a fantastic defense but is not allowed to play offense. There's no chance of winning. That's what it is in Ukraine and Russia. That came out the same week the State Department and the Defense Department revealed the president had authorized the sale of 3,000, not yet constructed, according to Scott Ritter, but he authorized the sale of 3,000 medium-range missiles to Ukraine. How does the Kremlin view that?
Once again, Judge, there are no illusions in the Kremlin. From the beginning and from the start of Trump 2.0. Basically, what they discussed in January, Musk is, okay, let's give it a try. We're open to all sorts of contacts, lateral, underground, direct, meetings, etc. And let's see what they propose. They were assuming that what the Americans were proposing before Alaska was serious. After Alaska, let's say that for 48 hours, they say, okay, it was positive, it was excellent. And this was the opinion of the Russian members of the ultra high-powered Russian delegation that actually went to Anchorage. But now they're back to, let's say they're back to January again. Okay, Is this all they have? Is this all they're offering? It's not enough. They still don't understand our red lines. So we'll continue to do what we're doing. And especially after Alaska, what happened in that absolutely appalling submission of the European chihuahuas in the Oval Office vis-a-vis Trump. The no illusion mindset in the Kremlin and in the intel services, the security services, now it's total.
How serious is Foreign Minister Lavrov that President Putin will not meet with Zelensky because he's not the valid, legitimate president of Ukraine? And before you answer that, watch what President Trump said about this, and you can comment on that as well. Chris, cut number 11.
This past weekend, Sergei Lavrov was saying that Putin will not sign a peace deal with Zelensky because Russia views him as illegitimate. I'm just wondering if the Russians had been relaying this to your team, if they view Zelensky, as a leader worth signing a peace deal with, if they will go to the
Doesn't matter what they say. Steve can answer, but I can answer it too. Doesn't matter what they say. Everybody's posturing. It's all bullshit, okay? Everybody's posturing. Steve, do you have a different answer?
I agree with you, sir.
Of course, he's going to agree with him on international television and at a cabinet meeting to his face. But when Trump calls a comment like that, made by the most serious and highly respected diplomat on the planet, how does the Kremlin view it?
They cannot take him seriously, Judge, because he's completely missing. He continues to be completely misinformed. He still doesn't know anything about the underlying causes of Maidan and then the SMO 3.5 years ago. And that brings us to the first big misunderstanding of the whole Alaska thing, which is Witkoff's misunderstanding. I called him the real estate Bismarck. Witkoff
I know you do. And the more we hear from him, the more he sounds like a real estate guy, and the less he manifests an understanding of Russian history, culture, and the Russian mentality.
Absolutely, Judge. And even worse, he didn't understand what Putin told him in Moscow that he would have to relay to Trump. He assumed, which is completely absurd, that the ultimate red line, which is no NATO in Ukraine, Putin would agree to discuss it. And that's what he told Trump. Trump believed Witkoff, and then Trump found out that that's not the case, and never was the case. So this goes way beyond a lost in translation moment. This encapsulates Ahmed is absolutely unprepared to deal with a dossier this serious, and he's misleading the president of the United States. On top of it, that's completely absurd. The whole thing. And of course, this brings us to the current kabuki, Judge, which is the peacekeepers kabuki. So what do we have now after the visit of the Europeans to the White House? The Europeans are like absolutely mad chihuahuas, screaming everywhere that we need a peacekeeping force in Ukraine, whatever happens, even before a ceasefire, not after a ceasefire. So the previous kabuki was we need a ceasefire. Not going to happen. Trump himself said, no ceasefire. So now the new kabuki is we need a peace.
So I'm going to stop this here. But what I want to say is, if they put a so-called peacekeeping force in there, if the European nations put troops on the ground in Ukraine right now, those troops will be destroyed by Russia. And in addition, a few of the European capitals are going to see the Oreshnik land in their capital cities. Because Putin is not fooling around about this. He warned them, no troops inside of Ukraine. And he has the military power to back that up. So, I'll check on your comments again, and then I'll move on to the next piece. By the way, it's not to say Petro is not addressing the drug trafficking problem, because he is, by agrarian reforms which lease land to campesinos to diversify their agro activity. Thank you, Evelina. That's very well put. First, by dismantling clandestine drug labs and paramilitary groups in the region. Paramilitary groups in the region have existed there since I was first in graduate school in the early 1960s. I mean, the paramilitary groups have always been there. Evelina says, mammoth tasks. There are 7 U.S. military bases in Colombia, not exactly helping Petro rid itself of the bad actors. Evelina says, Venezuela, on the other hand, is working with Colombia to neutralize cartel on their country. Thank you, Evelina, for those facts. Very important. Okay, going on to the next piece. Okay, this one is dealing with the claims that the U.S. is, bankrupt. Check that out.
Recreate the intelligence agencies from scratch because they've been a bit too close.
I think this starts, if I recall correctly, at 12:26. So I think I have to be there.
It takes dedication to leave your life's work rock solid for generations. At UPS, we match.
No president has put a stop to it. So I don't see things getting any better. I see government growing and liberty shrinking. Now, the United States government may die a natural death because it won't be able to pay its debt. And it owes 37 trillion. That will be 40 trillion when Trump leaves office. Now, you can do the math. The debt service on 40 trillion a year is over $1 trillion. No society could survive very long having that kind of debt service. If Trump repudiates the debt, that might be a very good thing, but a lot of people and governments and institutions will be out of luck, and then nobody will ever lend money to the American government again, and it will be forced to live within its means or tax people to death, and then there'll be a revolution. So one way or another, this will stop. I don't know if it'll stop in my lifetime, but it probably will in yours.
Okay, so the judge says those things very frequently. Okay. Colonel Mcgregor says those kinds of things also very frequently. Okay, let's see what Professor Glenn Diesen says.
This is a concern of mine because it appears we're moving towards another big financial crisis, probably sped ahead with these tariffs. But if there's a crisis in the dollar and it's attempted to be saved by increasing the interest rates, it's going to make it impossible to service the debt. So it just looks like we're moving towards a crisis which can't really be resolved.
Okay, so that's all I really wanted to pick up here. These folks don't understand, first, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which gives the power to Congress to coin money. There is no limit constitutionally on that particular power. There is a law in place. It was passed in 1996 as well, which allows the Treasury Secretary to order the Director of Mint to mint 1-ounce platinum coins with face values to be determined by the Secretary. Now, the suggestion has been made, particularly by Stephanie Kelton. I think she was the first to make the suggestion. She was doing it in gesto, in part, but it could still be done, that there be $100 trillion platinum coin that should be minted and deposited at the Federal Reserve Bank. That would create $100 trillion in the Treasury account. Not immediately. There are a few other steps, which I'm not going to go into here, but which are in my book and in my articles on my website at josephfirestone.com. Okay, but the basic point is when the $100 trillion coin is brought up to the Fed to be deposited, the Fed will have no choice but to accept the deposit of the coin, and in return for the coin to place $100 trillion in reserves into the Treasury spending account. Now, it isn't as simple as that. It takes a couple of steps, but basically, virtually $100 trillion would end up in the Treasury spending account. Now, legally, from a legal point of view, and Trump creates a little problem with this because he does illegal things all the time. But from a legal point of view, the $100 trillion could only be spent for two purposes. One is to repay the national debt as it falls due, and the other is to spend the appropriations of the federal government. And practically, that would work out in such a way that the coin could cover the deficit spending of the federal government for quite a few years. Of course, the $40 trillion in debt that the judge was speaking about could also all be repaid by the proceeds from the coin. So these foreign policy guys don't know what they're talking about. There is no financial crisis that can occur here in the United States which the government cannot resolve, using the money creation power of the federal government. The federal government doesn't have to issue any more debt. It can pay off the previous debt, which it should do as it falls due, no faster than that. If it does it faster than that, then it's going to be an inflationary situation. If it does it when it falls due, there will be no inflation resulting from that. So when you hear this stuff from the foreign policy guys, and a lot of the foreign policy guys, and I love them and God bless them, and I agree with very much of what they say, but when it comes to the bankruptcy of the United States, they're full of crap. It is not a necessary thing. So on that note, I will check your comments once more. There are no comments on that, so I will go on to the next piece. This piece is by Larry Wilkerson.
Well, he had three choices, three basic choices.
Sure, I don't think I'm in the right place for this one. So let me make sure that the video is in the right place. Yes. Starts at 34:39, so we're not playing the whole thing. We're playing about 21 minutes of it. About there.
None of these countries where Trump is trying to stir up action to get the attention off the Epstein case, thank you very much, none of these is in that arc. Therefore, none of these is what I would call existential for the empire. That one is. That one is. And we're rapidly losing those who could help us either stabilize that arc, or in the event we actually bring on conflict, be neutral at worst and on our side at best, like India. Nima, we expended tremendous energy in diplomatic efforts for 20 years trying to win India over to our side, away from the Soviet Union / Russia and over to our side. We felt like at the time we already had Pakistan, but we were sharing Pakistan with Beijing. No question about that. And the Pakistanis knew that. They played us off against one another. That was all right as long as it wasn't serious. India was our target. India became very much a full-time, almost partner, especially their Navy, and took a lot of burden off of us in the Northern Indian Ocean because their Navy's fairly good and fairly large. And their Navy really liked working with the U.S. fleet. They thought we were the most competent sailors on the ocean, and they enjoyed working with us. Delhi was not quite so close and comfortable with it, but nonetheless, we had a good relationship. We've ruined all of that, Nima. 20 years of painstaking diplomacy. We've ruined that. We've ruined it so badly that India looks like it's making up with China. It's stunning. It's stunning how stupid we are, Nima. How unwise we are. Stupid and unwise.
Actually, of course, I have to say I entirely agree with that. From our point of view and from considerations of the balance of power, the most important country on the world, in the world, to have on our side right now is India, because it serves as a counterweight to China for the long term. And now Trump's tariff games have thrown India into the arms of China, which we're seeing right now at SCO, at the SCO conference. Very important.
The Modi, he just ignored the pressure coming from the United States, and
yep,
we're not gonna. We're gonna continue buying Russian oil.
We've done something else that I thought was impossible. We've made Modi think about other things so that he's not quite so oppressive as he was against his own Muslims. Unquestionably, we've been a positive force in that regard, but that's a negative, having to do that, having to sacrifice your own interest in order to get his attention elsewhere. But his principal attention, I think, right now is on us and what we're doing, and China and how to counter what we're doing, and Russia. But India's always been friendly with Russia. Indian military, other than the Navy, we couldn't wean the Air Force or the Army away from Russia. We weaned the Navy a little bit because of the interoperability and the practice together in the Indian Ocean, but we couldn't get the other two services. So we never were totally successful with that. But now we've ruined everything.
Donald Trump said that, in his opinion, the Ministry of Defense should be the Ministry of War. And what
be more appropriate for the last 20 years.
Yeah. Putting that, taking that into consideration and looking at what he said about denuclearization, here is what he said.
To do with Russia and with China is denuclearization. And it's very important. One of the things I discussed with President Putin the other day, it wasn't just that, it was also other things. And I think the denuclearization is it's a big aim, but Russia's willing to do it, and I think China's going to be willing to do it too. We can't let nuclear weapons proliferate. We have to stop nuclear weapons. The power is too great.
Best remarks I've heard out of him in a long time, but of course I know he's insincere as hell. He is totally insincere. He's just saying that because that is the moment du jour, the time to say it.
Because to consider what was happening, that he told us this sort of idea. He was meeting with the South Korean president.
Yeah.
I think a main goal is North Korea, and do you think that's the case, or
Well, he went on to talk about how he was going to continue with Kim Jong-un and it was going to be successful this time, that he had a little problem with some people in the past, like John Bolton. Thank you very much. I was so surprised he didn't say his name. I mean, what a time to throw one at John Bolton. He's had his house searched by the FBI. Why not throw a big rock at him too? Like, you screwed up my relationship with Kim Jong-un, you neoconservative ass. I mean, that's what Trump would have liked to have said, I think. He didn't, and that's unlike Donald Trump, is to hold those kind of barbs back. But after all, he was in front of the cameras and with the South Korean president, whom he now likes because he wants to make up with Kim Jong-un too. I mean, he explicitly said that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay. Let's get back on a peace treaty with Kim Jong-un. It would be very easy to accomplish if we would back off the incredible thing we've done with Korea, because we're not on Korea today to defend Korea. We're on Korea today to be forward positioned to fight China. And the Koreans sense that viscerally, if not intellectually. I think some of it.
So, where have you heard that from anybody else?
No, I haven't.
From Larry Wilkerson. Yeah, we haven't heard anywhere else, have we, D? But that's
No, we haven't.
an incredibly wise comment. And the reason why he's saying that is because the North Koreans are no threat to the South.
No.
They're not going to attack the South. I mean, what do they care about the South? They're going to develop themselves in cooperation with the Russian attempts to develop the Far East of Russia. They are now on track to get help from Russia and China to develop themselves. What kind of need have they got for a war with South Korea? They don't care about South Korea, anymore. So, I think Larry realizes that. And that's why he said that. We're not there to defend South Korea. They need no defense.
Intellectually. And they're not too happy with their peninsula being used as a launch pad for a war against China, with whom they do most of their commerce. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, Nima. It's crazy. What we're doing is crazy, not just Kuwait, but also in Northeast Asia.
None of these countries can go against China. Korea, South Korea, together with Japan.
They don't have to either, because they have good commercial relationships. They have good trade. They have not totally balanced trade, but that's just the nature of the beast. Some people are going to sell more and some people are going to buy more and so forth. And you work those things and you massage them and you keep them within a equitable amount of trade dynamics. We don't seem to think that's impossible with China. We think China's going to rip everybody a new rear end. They are ripping everybody a new rear end, but they're doing it principally because we're motivating them to. We're motivating them to do that. We're motivating them to do things like take the 60% of rare earth metals, which they have, the 90% of those metals that are refined to the point of use, and not give them to anybody that needs them that's inimical to China's interest. Read the empire. And we're gonna discover just how disastrous these tariffs are. Not so much, although we're going to do it there too, but not so much in the impact it's going to have on the American consumer. It will, and that'll be politically dynamite. But it's also going to is having major impact on the ability of the Pentagon to field forces and to supply them, because China has so much. You talk about EV batteries, you talk about charging stations I read the other day that China has 1 million or something like that or more charging stations all across the country. We have 1/60th of that. They're just so far ahead in so many categories that are important. And look what's happening. China is ripping our rear end off in terms of renewables. I mean, they are just going bangers.
Oh.
And look what Donald Trump just did. He pretty much murdered the ability of the United States to progress further in wind and solar because he doesn't like, and he said this, I don't like those fields out there full of those black panels instead of beautiful trees and birds. And I don't like those towers because those towers kill birds. Donald, when was the last time you became an ornithologist? I mean, come on, man. We need renewables in a certain percentage to replace fossil fuels, or we're all toast. Do you not get that? No, he doesn't. He doesn't. In his heart of hearts, I don't think this is a fabrication. I don't think this is something forced on him by the billionaires. It could be in part because they want the fossil fuels to continue, many of them, like the people behind Peter Thiel, for example, and Charles Koch for absolute. Charles Koch would bring back coal if he could, because he was one of the biggest, richest coal magnates in America. They don't want renewables replacing fossil fuels. But I think Trump has this crazy idea in his head that fossil fuels are good, that they're good for the environment. They're not bad. It's all a hoax. I think he believes that. I do. I think he believes that. This is probably the most unconscionable.
I'm so tired of having a situation where we're electing people who are so intellectually incapable of running the United States. It started with W. Okay, then we had Obama, who at least has a brain which he sometimes exercised. Then we had Trump. And then we had a Joe Biden, who was never the sharpest pencil in the box. But we had Joe Biden in rapid cognitive decline. And now we have Trump, who was always an incapable ignoramus, who would throw things up against the wall without ever considering the side effects of what he was doing and having disastrous side effects. I think the American people let him off when it came to COVID. He was the reason why there were so many deaths under COVID. Yeah, I know Biden had as many deaths as Trump. But it was Trump who set the stage. If Trump's policies on COVID had been the correct ones, we could have had a fraction of the deaths that we had. I mean, look at China. Look at the deaths they had from COVID. How many people died from COVID in China? 10,000, maybe 20,000? In a country with a population 3.5 times our size, 4 times our size. I mean, they had 1/100th of the deaths. Come on, it's obvious the policies we were following were the wrong policies. Trump threw up his hands, threw the problem over to the states to handle. We can't afford to have morons as president of the United States anymore. The next person has to be aware, has to be bright, has to be sensible, and has to be practical.
And have a good education.
Barney says, and has to have had, a good education. The only problem with that is Donald Trump did go to the Wharton School. So technically, on the surface, he had a good education. So, in other words, you can't always tell. Well, of course, what he did is hire people to take his exams for him. That's what he did. He cheated. That's how he got out of there. Anyway, we need to elect people as president of the United States who are as bright or brighter than Vladimir Putin. That should be a requirement. Let's go on.
Debilitating and wrong concept he holds in that head of his.
Yeah.
He's been sold a bill of goods by many of his advisors, I'm sure. And I'll tell you who a lot of these advisors are now. If you want to read a book that'll tell you about this, it's called Dark Crusade. And it's about the dispensationalists in America, who now constitute somewhere between 60 and 75 million of our citizens. Another term for them is fundamentalists. And these people are allied with Israel to bring about Armageddon, the rapture, because they think they and their philosophy goes this way. Think about South America and that guy who took the people down there and got, 900 of them killed. Their philosophy is that they will be raptured up into the heavens with Jesus when the end comes. And they're trying their best to bring about the end. This is a huge Great Awakening event in America that most people are utterly ignorant of. Maybe because so many Americans are part of it.
I think what's missing in the picture, in the mind of those people who are deciding about what would be the strategy of the United States, is that somehow it's not understandable for them that what Russia is doing in Ukraine is existential for Russia and Russian security.
Yep.
What Palestinians, Gazan, are doing is existential.
And Netanyahu would say it's existential for him too, because he means it's existential for greater Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, maybe parts of Sudan, Egypt. It ends the dream. It ends the dream. Oh, I have to kill all the Palestinians. And then I have to kill a few Arabs too, other than Palestinian Arabs. Maybe some Egyptians can't make up their mind whether they're Arabs or not. Technically speaking, I don't think the Egyptians, looking at history, I don't think the Egyptians are Arabs. I think the genealogical record, the DNA record would differ with that. I don't think they're Arabs in Egypt, but I think the bulk of the Egyptian people aren't Arabs. And we make a mistake in calling them Arabs, but they want a little bit of that too. So Israel's ready to kill a lot of people.
The point that I'm trying to make, Larry, is that all these wars that the United States has been doing, it's not any of them, none of them was existential for the United States. They don't need to go to Iraq, to Afghanistan, to Libya. Right now with Venezuela, if they go to Iran.
Lindsey Graham thinks they are, Nima. And why does he think that? OIL. He thinks that we have to have our hands on all the oil we can possibly get our hands on. We thought we were going to get our hands on. Remember that book I told you about that has a little photo in there of the Caspian Sea and the U.S. paratroopers landing outside Baku? And I said, boy, isn't that a prophetic photograph? Because those are the first Imperial stormtroopers to land in Central Asia. Because under the Caspian Sea is enough fossil fuel, methane and regular crude, for all of the entire Central Asian complex, all the stands into Xinjiang province. 100 years of fossil fuel under the Caspian Sea. If you can get to it, if you can retrieve it, and if you can get it out and put it on the market. Now, those are big challenges, but nonetheless, it's there. We were after that, Nima, big time. I was there when we were planning it. Now I think we've given up on that. that means we have got to find other sources. Venezuela, other places that might have oil.
I don't know if you.
By the way, the Kochs love the Venezuelan oil because one thing lacking, okay, in Venezuela are the refineries to refine all of the Venezuelan oil. The way the Venezuelans have been getting their oil is they ship it up. They were shipping it up to the Koch brothers empire in Houston, because they had the refineries that could do the work of refining that oil. So they would do that for the Venezuelans, and then they would ship it back but to Venezuela. So there was a two-way trade that has been going on all this time. The United States won't stop the two-way trade because the Koch brothers are so powerful here, and they want it to continue. Of course, only Charles Koch, is alive anymore. But the Koch empire is still there. Okay, so Larry says that Charles Koch loves coal and would like to go back to coal. I think he's just as happy to stick with the Venezuelan oil and get to refine all of it, over the years. I don't think he wants a war with Venezuela, because he can get the oil without a war.
By the way, you know where the rest of it is? I mean, really just incredible amounts in the country of 11 time zones. Russia hasn't even come close to tapping the various sources of fossil fuels that they have. So, I think
I agree with that from Larry. I think much of it is unexplored from the standpoint of what fossil fuel material is available there.
When Trump stands up there and says, we're the biggest oil producer in the world. Yeah, we're fracking the bejesus out of our country in order to do that. It's a very untenable situation economically and geologically, but we're doing it. And we can't keep doing that forever. On the other hand, in Central Asia and in Russia are enough assets to last for another century and a half. Now, I hope they don't. Not unless we discover some marvelous technology that cleans up emissions almost 99%, because that would set it off. I mean, we'd be done. We'd be toast with regard to the climate if we burned all those assets. I'm just saying what the differential is right now. Trump is a fool to think that the United States is going to remain the number one oil power in the world. It's a farcical dream that we would do so.
Trump has a lot of farcical dreams.
I don't know if you saw the interview that Lutnick had on MSNBC, on NBC News. Here is what he said about Lockheed Martin. He says that the company makes 97% of their revenue from the U.S. government.
I would have thought it was 100.
Yeah, here is what he said, Larry.
Defense companies, though, Secretary. Why shouldn't the U.S. government say, you know what, we use Palantir services. We would like a piece of Palantir. We use Boeing services. We would like a piece of Boeing. There are a lot of businesses that do business with the U.S. government that benefit by doing business with the U.S. government. I guess the question is, where's the line?
Oh, there's a monstrous discussion about defense. I mean, Lockheed Martin makes 97% of their revenue from the U.S. government. They are basically an arm of the U.S. government. They make exquisite munitions. I mean, amazing things that can knock a missile out of the air when it's coming towards you. But what's the economics of that? I'm going to...
You cannot knock a hypersonic missile out of the air when it comes towards you. Sorry about that, Howard.
Leave that to my Secretary of Defense and the Deputy Secretary of Defense. These guys are on it and they're thinking about it. But I tell you what, There's a lot of talking that needs to be had about how do we finance our munitions acquisitions. I think a lot of that is talking. And now you have the right people in the jobs and Donald Trump at the head thinking about what is the right way to do it. I tell you, the way it has been done has been a giveaway.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. And there was a major movement at different junctures in our history since World War II when we first created this huge complex. And that is to nationalize it. And there are good arguments for nationalizing it. But I would not nationalize it under the current administration and its cabinet because they couldn't handle it. But if you had decent oversight, if you had a good Congress with good oversight committees, if you had a good investigative committee like Harry Truman had in World War II, if you had all these things going, you could nationalize the defense industry and you would really be going back to the past. Because America never had until World War II a huge complex of privatized defense industry. It's shipbuilding. All those things were done by the government, sometimes through contractors, but more or less overseen by, checked by the government. Only World War II brought the private enterprise in big time. And FDR's the dollar man, as it were, you know, all these big CEOs that said they'd work for $1 a year. They knew that working for $1 a year was a pipe dream because they were making tons of money off the military industrial complex as it grew up, which is why Truman had his investigative committee. And he found, I think Truman said something like, war profiteering is not going to happen on my watch. Well, it continued to happen, of course. But he.
Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that point. Larry had a lot to say about the many ways in which we're on the verge, of a disaster. I was happy to see that he did not say that there was no way that we were going to be able to pay back the debt. I think he has said that somewhere else, but at least on this program, he did not say it. So we're still not finished with that topic. It's our final topic of the night, except, of course, the ultimate topic, which I'll talk about in just a little while. But before we say goodbye to being on the verge of, disaster, I do want to have a short video. So this is a Danny Haifong video where he is interviewing Jeffrey Sachs. And so Danny is playing a clip of some stupid things, Peter Navarro is saying.
Potential start in conflict and critical nuclear for Ukraine. And then you have Professor Sachs, Peter Navarro, this anti-China hawk who is an advisor to his and Trump's manufacturing trade division. He has this to say about India. There's a lot of
Peter Navarro is one of the guys behind the tariffs. He's really a stupid guy.
China, Russia, getting closer to thoughts on this world, given what here happens. If Ukraine comes to us, give us some more money. Everybody because India is going to contribute because India's high and factories and income. And the taxpayers will be more, okay? The peace wants to make rights to tell us where I this is he's referring to Ukraine. This war. And we've heard this right, Ukraine is China's war because China keeps trading with but there's a bigger picture Modi and working on potential between each other. These relations between the two countries historic almost Trump unite. Okay, the world against the U.S. Uniting the world.
So Jeff Sachs thinks the priority is to unite the world, even if it's uniting against us.
Sorry, what they have done is the blow up of the India relations. I always hope I have so many colleagues that I discuss that is completely untrustworthy. There's no such trusting alliance with the United States and India don't see the U.S. against China. That's a reckless are in display as hegemonic game. It's not its interest. Well, here are Trump have made the most obvious way in the last weeks. I'm speaking to a lot of very senior Indian officials, to business broke as the India relations. I always war as the percent so-called which is is and close of China already underway for several months because that's for both of them. Flurry of activity, measures against and against India. Something I have been really close up. And this up high the last couple of foreign ministers. Race organization. I did for this the BRICS. And talk about the conflict. One of the consequences of how the father of hegemony overall world and the Ukraine conflict got its continuing escalation on U.S. debt to a great degree faster. states. Got it. Just in West States, with Israel.
What's going on?
I'm going to leave things on that note. That fits in with the idea that we are on the verge of a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is where we are going. Now, the final topic for tonight, poor souls. Evelyn says missing the entire interview, I'm afraid. Did I fail to share that interview?
Yes, it was quiet for a while, so I was wondering what was going on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have screwed things up. So let me go back to Evelina's comments. Is Trump sincere about talking with North Korea? According to Colonel Wilkerson, that is. I think he is sincere. He always wanted to talk to North Korea. He just had some feeling that Kim Jong-un was a kindred spirit. But not sincere about the denuclearization with Russia and China. Have I got that right? No, I think he does want to see the denuclearization of ourselves with Russia and China. He doesn't think he can get any lessening of nuclear weapons on the part of Russia and China unless we do the same. I think he understands that. Evelyn says suicidals went down to South America, but not LATAM. Wasn't it Belize or or to Guyana? I forget. Evelina can't make out Haifeng interviewing Jay Sachs. Okay, it's muddled. Evelina says, poor souls, missing the entire interview, I'm afraid. I lost you altogether now. Evelina says, you're back again. I think what I did is I failed to share the interview. I was playing it, but I failed to share it. So I'm going to apologize for that. But the basic point Jeffrey Sachs was making in that interview is that our foreign policy is full of misconceptions, okay, and hopeless, quite hopeless, and that if we persist in it, we're going to be isolated and it's going to be a disaster for the United States. So that was his central point. I'm not going to replay the interview for you, but the link is on the YouTube description, I think. But what I wanted to do now is the final topic for tonight is to say goodbye. I've decided that these streams don't have the impact that I hoped for the streams. And because they don't have the impact, I think while I'm taking a risk in doing streams like this, which are pretty heavy in the criticism of the administration, I'm not getting the impact that would actually justify continuing to do the streams. There's an economic side of this also, which I'm not going to talk about. But anyway, I have lots of other things that I can do, even though I love the streams and have enjoyed doing them, for a very long time. And here I want to thank the people who always come to these streams. One of them is Evelina Pont. And I'd like to thank you, Evelina, for coming to almost every stream. And, Stephen Wolfbrand, who's not here tonight, I want to thank him for coming to almost every stream. Dee, I want to thank you for helping me out with all of these streams. Your help has been invaluable. I'm going to be back for occasional streams. I have some streams coming up, some MMT interviews, at least 2. From time to time, I expect I'll be back talking about maybe sustainability questions, talking about the relationship of AI to sustainability. But the streams are going to be special events. They won't be part of a regular schedule. So the regularly scheduled Tuesday and Saturday streams are over for now. I have to get on to other things that will have a greater impact and that will also produce some financial rewards that Bonnie and I very badly need at this point. But I want to thank you all for coming to the streams, and I want to tell you how much I enjoyed all of these, particular streams. If it was just a matter of personal enjoyment, I would be continuing them. But unfortunately, there are other factors involved that I now have to pay attention to. So on that note, I'm going to say goodbye. This is the final regular stream for empowering democracy. John B. says, thank you, Joe. I don't often comment, but I always appreciate your work. Farewell. Thank you, John B. I certainly appreciate that. And I thank you for coming into the streams, even though you don't often comment. When you do comment, though, those comments are very, very good. And I always appreciate them. So, Dee, I think it's time to say goodnight. We've been here for 3 hours and 12 minutes. Are you still here, Dee? I think we've lost Dee. I'm sorry to have lost her. I hope she heard my thank you to her. But she seems to be frozen. Her mic is all right. So she should be able to comment. But I cannot hear her at this point. I myself have frozen. My picture is frozen. But I know you can hear me. So once again, thank you all. And on that note, I'll say good night. Any word on, on Warren Mosler's health? Well, I think his health is good enough to contemplate a run for the presidency in 2028. I know Warren is considering that. If he does run, it's probably going to be on the Green Party ticket, which would make a very interesting run. Certainly, John B. Dee, are you still here? I guess Dee is not. Okay, Dr. Joe, will you? Hey, Dee, you're here.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Okay, you heard me thank you for all your work for the stream.
Yeah.
Good. That was the important thing. Evelina says, Dr. Joe, will you be on FB? Yeah, I'll continue to be on Facebook. I won't be streaming on Facebook except when I have the special streams I talked about. But I will be available if you want to send me messages. I'll be on Facebook. Okay, and I'll continue to be on, on Messenger. I expect I may sometimes be doing streams for, Shane Coughlin. But those will be special streams. But I'm discontinuing this program for now. I may take it up again at some time, but in the future, when it becomes clear that Donald Trump won't be successful in creating the dictatorship that he's trying to create. But as for now, I feel so far he's been all too successful about that. I don't think the courts have been sufficiently vigorous in stopping him. I don't think the Democratic Party has been sufficiently vigorous in trying to counter him. And I think at this point he has a good chance to create the police state he's looking for if he can stay alive. So in that state, I want to keep my own head down. And I want to be occupying myself with things which would allow myself and Bonnie to survive. So Once again, thank you all very much for coming to the streams. And I'm sure I'll see you again in other places and other environments.
Yes, we look forward to hearing from you and having you, participate in different things. We've all been with you for so long.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Dee. I'm sure I'll drop in, every once in a while. John B. says, I think that U.S. domestic economic problems will cut short the mayhem of Donald Trump. I think there's a good possibility of that. And that may happen very, very soon. And if it happens very, very soon, then I won't have to be concerned about the risk inherent in making more videos like this one. Of course, you're aware that in this particular video, how many times did I refer to Trump as an idiot? How many times did I refer to him as stupid? How many times did I refer to him as a moron? I'm lucky, I guess, in one way that these videos don't get too many views because I'm not really so noticeable. Okay, on the other hand, if I was very noticeable, then it would be worth it to take the risk. But the way I figure it is I don't think the risk is worth taking anymore. Okay, since the return in terms of audience level is just too small.
Mm-hmm.
Evelina says, geez, Dr. Joe, I'll miss you. Well, thank you, Evelina. I'll miss you too. But we can see each other on Facebook, and in Messenger. And we can always communicate in that way. John B. says, truth hurts, Joe. But only cowards, cheer on the despot. Well, I'm certainly not cheering on a despot, that's for sure. So once again, on that sad note, I will say good night.
Yes, good night, Joe.
Good night.
Good night, Bonnie.
Okay, I wish you all well.
Yes, wish you well too, you and Bonnie.
Okay, thank you, Dee. Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.